So we were walking along there, and the guy, I said to Al, maybe we go to the Salvation Army and see if there's a soup kitchen or something. I asked the guy where it was, and he looked at us and he said, yeah, it's down a couple blocks, and you go over and this. And I said, thank you. And he said, you're welcome, Mr. Hackman, Mr. Pacino.
February 17th, 2025, 9:47 p.m. Inside a quiet home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a 95-year-old man's pacemaker records something it was never designed to detect. A pulse. Not from his heart. From outside his body. A low-level electromagnetic wave, invisible, silent, deadly. Within seconds, his heart stops. He collapses in the foyer. And for 9 days nobody knows. But here's what will make your blood run cold. The FBI found proof. Proof that something interfered with that pacemaker. Proof that Gene Hackman, the legendary actor who survived Hollywood, the Marines, and 95 years of life, may not have died of natural causes. And if you think you know how this story ends, you're wrong. Because what killed Gene Hackman might still be out there. And before we go any further, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to tell you is so disturbing, so technically bizarre, that you'll want to share it with everyone you know. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this case is already global and the FBI still has no answers. Let's go back to February 26, 2025. 9 days after that signal. A maintenance worker pulls up to Gene Hackman's property for a routine service call. The heater's been acting up. It's a standard job. He's been to this house before. Gene and his wife Betsy keep to themselves, but they're always polite, always there. The house sits on a sprawling piece of land, the kind of place where neighbors are measured in miles, not feet. Privacy. Isolation. The kind of quiet that most people dream about. But on this day that quiet is wrong. The worker parks his truck, grabs his toolbox and walks toward the front door. And that's when he sees it. The door is wide open. Not cracked. Not slightly ajar. Wide open. Wind is blowing through the entryway, scattering leaves across the tile floor inside. He stops. His gut tells him something is off. He calls out. Hello? Mr. Hackman? Anyone home? Nothing. Just wind. Just silence. He steps closer, peering inside. And then he sees it. A body. Face down on the foyer floor. Stiff. Pale. Motionless. His heart is hammering now. He steps inside, phone already in his hand, and he recognizes the face even in death. Gene Hackman. One of the greatest actors who ever lived. Dead on his own floor. But he's not alone. The worker moves through the house, his breath shallow, his hands shaking. He's calling 911 now, his voice cracking as he stammers into the phone. He finds Betsy Arakawa, Gene's wife, in the bathroom. She's lying near the toilet, her body slumped against the tile. Pill bottles are scattered around her. Blood pressure medication. Thyroid pills. All hers. Not Gene's. And beside her, in a nearby closet, is one of their dogs. Dead. Curled up as if it had been trying to hide. The other 2 dogs are alive barely. They're staggering through the house, dehydrated, weak, ribs showing. They've been alone for days. The 911 operator is asking questions, but the maintenance worker can barely answer. 2 bodies. 1 dead dog. 2 live dogs. An open door. And no signs of a break-in. No forced entry. No robbery. No blood. No weapon. Just death. Quiet, strange, unexplained death. And when the local police arrive, they don't know what they're looking at. It looks like a tragedy. An old couple found too late. But within hours this stops being a local case. Because Gene Hackman isn't just anyone. And when the FBI gets involved, everything changes. The Santa Fe Police Department secures the scene. They do the basics. They check every door, every window. No signs of forced entry. They walk through each room. Nothing's missing. Betsy's jewelry is still in the bedroom. Gene's watches, his awards, all untouched. The TVs are there. The laptops. Everything. This isn't a robbery. They check for gas leaks. Carbon monoxide is a silent killer, especially in older homes. They bring in detectors, run tests. Nothing. The house is clean. No gas. No chemical leaks. No environmental hazards. They look at the pills around Betsy. All prescription. All hers. No signs of an overdose, no suicide note. Just scatter. Like she dropped them in a panic. Or in confusion. The officers start piecing together a timeline. The mail is piled up. 9 days worth. The dogs are emaciated. The bodies are in advanced stages of decomposition. Rigor mortis has come and gone. They've been dead for over a week. But why didn't anyone notice? Because Gene and Betsy Hackman were private. deeply private. Their neighbors lived far away. They didn't do social media. They didn't throw parties. They kept to themselves. 2 weeks without contact? For them that was normal. But 9 days dead in their own home? That's not normal. That's a failure. A gap. A window where something happened and nobody saw. And then the FBI arrives. When a celebrity dies under unusual circumstances, especially someone like Gene Hackman, the Bureau takes an interest. They come in with their own team. Forensic specialists, tech analysts, medical examiners who've seen everything. And they start asking different questions. Not just how did they die, but why. And more importantly, what happened in this house between the time Gene collapsed and the time that maintenance worker found them. The first thing they do is pull Gene's pacemaker data. Modern pacemakers are sophisticated devices. They don't just regulate heartbeats. They record them. Every beat. Every irregularity. Every anomaly. And Gene's pacemaker tells a story that stops the FBI team cold. Gene Hackman's heart stopped on February 17th at 9:47 p.m. Not February 26th. February 17th. 9 days before he was found. The data is clear, precise, undeniable. But here's the part that sends chills through the investigation. Right before his heart stopped, the pacemaker recorded something unusual. Electrical interference. Small, rapid spikes in the data. Not from his heart. From outside. Like something was disrupting the device. The FBI brings in engineers, pacemaker specialists from the manufacturer. They analyze the data byte by byte. And they confirm it. There was an external electromagnetic pulse. Low-level, targeted, brief. But enough. Enough to interfere with the pacemaker's function. Enough to cause a fatal arrhythmia. Enough to stop Gene Hackman's heart. The FBI is now treating this as something else entirely. Not a natural death. Not an accident. A potential external interference event. And if you're wondering what that means, let me spell it out. Something or someone sent an electromagnetic signal into that house on February 17th. A signal that disrupted Gene Hackman's pacemaker. A signal that killed him. And here's the terrifying part. This kind of technology exists. It's not science fiction. Electromagnetic pulse devices, signal jammers, RF disruptors, they're real. Some are used by governments. Some by hackers. Some are homemade. And in the right hands or the wrong hands, they can be weaponized. The FBI starts searching the property for any device that could have emitted such a signal. They bring in RF scanners, electromagnetic detectors, the kind of gear you see in spy movies. They sweep the house, the yard, the perimeter. And they find traces. Faint, residual signatures of a low-frequency electromagnetic wave. Not from the power lines. Not from household electronics. Something else. Something that didn't belong. But there's no device. No transmitter. No gadget hidden in the bushes or buried in the yard. Whatever sent that signal is gone. Or was never there to begin with. The FBI is facing a ghost. A technological phantom that killed a man and left almost no trace. And the questions are piling up faster than the answers. Was this an accident? Some kind of freak environmental event? A power surge from a nearby source? Or was it deliberate? Was Gene Hackman targeted? And if so, by who? And why? The man had been retired for over 20 years. He lived quietly. He had no known enemies. No scandals. No feuds. He was 95 years old, living out his final years in peace with the woman he loved. Who would want him dead? And why use something as sophisticated, as invisible, as an electromagnetic pulse? The FBI is also looking at Betsy. Because she didn't die on February 17th. At least they don't think she did. Her body shows less decomposition than Gene's. The medical examiner estimates she died a few days after him. Maybe February 19th or 20th. But the cause of death is harder to pin down. Heart failure, possibly. A stroke, maybe. But there are also signs of trauma. A bruise on her temple. Scrapes on her knees. Like she fell. Or stumbled. Or was trying to move through the house in a panic. The pills scattered around her tell a story of desperation. She was trying to take her medication. Or maybe she dropped them. Maybe her hands were shaking. Maybe she was dizzy, disoriented, terrified. Imagine it. You hear a thud. You run to the foyer and find your husband of 34 years dead on the floor. You try to revive him. You call his name. You shake him. Nothing. You grab the phone, but you're in shock, your thoughts are scattered. Maybe you can't even dial. Maybe you forget how. You go for your pills, trying to calm your racing heart, trying to steady yourself. But your body is failing too. Maybe that signal affected you as well, just not as severely. Maybe it didn't kill you instantly, but it weakened you. disrupted your own heart, your own nervous system. And over the next few days, alone in that house with your dead husband, with your dying dog, with no one coming to help, your body gives out. That's the theory the FBI is working with. But it's just a theory. And theories don't bring justice. They don't explain the open door. They don't explain how nobody noticed for 9 days. They don't explain where that signal came from. And they definitely don't explain what happened to the dog. One of Gene and Betsy's 3 dogs was found dead in a closet near the bathroom where Betsy's body was discovered. The other 2 dogs were alive, though barely. The vet who examined them said they were severely dehydrated, malnourished, and showed signs of being trapped inside the house for at least a week. But the dead dog is a mystery. It wasn't old. It wasn't sick. The vet found no clear cause of death. No poison. No injury. Just dead. Curled up in a closet like it was trying to hide. Like it sensed something was wrong and tried to escape. Could that electromagnetic pulse have affected the dog too? Animals are sensitive to things humans aren't. They can hear frequencies we can't. They can sense electromagnetic fields. Maybe the dog was closer to the source when the pulse hit. Maybe it got a stronger dose. Or maybe it died of thirst, trapped in that closet while Betsy was too disoriented to let it out. The FBI doesn't know. But they're testing the dog's tissues for any signs of electrical damage, any cellular abnormalities that might point to EM exposure. And while they wait for those results, they're also looking at the maintenance worker who found the bodies. Not because they suspect him, but because they have to rule him out. He's the last person to see the scene before the police arrived. He's the one who called it in. And in cases like this, the FBI looks at everyone. His story checks out. His record is clean. He has no motive, no connection to Gene or Betsy beyond routine service calls. But they interview him again. And again. They ask him about that open door. Did you open it? No. It was already open. Did you touch anything inside? Just checked for signs of life. Did you see anyone else? Hear anything? No. Nothing. Just wind and bodies and those dogs. The FBI believes him. But they keep his name in the file. Just in case. Because in a case this strange, nothing is off the table. And as the investigation deepens, as more data comes in, as more questions pile up without answers, one thing becomes horrifyingly clear. Gene Hackman did not die of old age. Something killed him. Something invisible. Something that left barely a trace. And the FBI is racing against time to figure out what it was before the trail goes completely cold. If you're as stunned as I am, drop a like on this video right now. And comment below, do you think this was an accident or something far more sinister? Because what comes next is even more disturbing. February 17th, 9:47 p.m. Gene Hackman collapses in the foyer of his Santa Fe home. His pacemaker records the exact moment his heart stops. An electromagnetic pulse has just disrupted the delicate electrical signals keeping him alive. He's dead before he hits the floor. But Betsy Arakawa is still alive. And what happens to her over the next 9 days is a nightmare that the FBI is still trying to piece together. Because Betsy didn't die immediately. She survived for days, possibly as long as 72 hours, alone in that house with Gene's body, with a dying dog, with no help coming. And the FBI is asking a question that has no good answer. Why didn't she call for help? The phones worked. Both the landline and the cell phones were functional, fully charged. The doors weren't locked from the outside. She could have left. She could have driven to a neighbor, flagged down a passing car, walked to the main road. But she didn't. Or couldn't. And the reconstruction of those 9 days is one of the most haunting aspects of this entire case. The FBI starts with the timeline. Gene dies at 9:47 p.m. on February 17th. The pacemaker data is absolute. But when did Betsy die? The medical examiner can't be precise. Decomposition rates vary based on temperature, humidity, body composition. But based on the state of her body compared to Gene's, the estimate is somewhere between February 19th and February 21st. 2 to 4 days after Gene. 2 to 4 days of being alone. The FBI believes she heard Gene fall. Maybe she was in another room, reading, playing piano, watching TV. She hears a crash and rushes to the foyer. And there he is. The man she's been with for over 40 years. The man she married in 1991. The man who left Hollywood behind to build a quiet life with her in New Mexico. Dead on the floor. She tries to wake him. She shakes him, calls his name, checks for a pulse. Nothing. Panic sets in. Her own heart is racing. She's 65 years old and suddenly she's alone with a corpse. She needs to call 911. But here's where the FBI thinks things went wrong. If that electromagnetic pulse affected Gene's pacemaker, could it have affected Betsy too? She didn't have a pacemaker, but the human body is electrical. The heart, the brain, the nervous system, they all run on electrical impulses. A strong enough EM pulse can disrupt those signals, cause dizziness, confusion, disorientation, memory loss, even temporary paralysis. The FBI brings in neurologists, electromagnetic field specialists. They run simulations, calculate exposure levels based on the signal strength detected in the house. And the results are chilling. If Betsy was in the same room as Gene or even in an adjacent room when that pulse hit, she could have been affected. Not fatally, not immediately, but enough to scramble her thoughts, affect her motor control, cloud her judgment. Enough to make her forget how to use a phone. Enough to make her stumble through the house, dropping pills, falling, unable to think clearly. Imagine waking up from anesthesia, that foggy, disconnected feeling where you can't quite remember where you are or what you're supposed to do. Now imagine that lasting for hours. Or days. That might have been Betsy's reality. And if she couldn't think straight, couldn't process what was happening, she might have just wandered through the house, trying to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around her, until her body finally gave out. The FBI also considers another possibility. What if she did try to call for help, but the phones didn't work? What if that same electromagnetic interference that killed Gene also fried the phone lines, even temporarily? They checked the phone records. And this is where things get even stranger. There are no outgoing calls from the house after February 17th. None. Not a single attempt to dial 911, not a call to a friend or neighbor, nothing. But the phones were working when the police arrived on February 26th. So either the phones were disrupted for days and then mysteriously started working again, or Betsy never tried to use them. Both scenarios are disturbing. The FBI interviews the phone company, checks for outages or service disruptions in the area around February 17th. There were none. The lines were active. The cell towers were functioning. If Betsy had picked up a phone and dialed, it would have worked. So why didn't she? The theory that she was too disoriented, too affected by the EM pulse, is the leading explanation. But it's not the only one. There's another theory, darker, harder to prove. What if she did call for help, but someone stopped the call from going through? What if that electromagnetic pulse wasn't random? What if it was part of a coordinated attack? Something designed not just to kill Gene but to isolate Betsy, to prevent her from summoning help. It sounds like a spy thriller, like something out of a Jason Bourne movie. But the FBI has seen stranger things. And in a case where an invisible signal killed a 95-year-old man, nothing is too far-fetched to consider. They start looking into Gene Hackman's past. Not his film career, though that's impressive enough. His life before Hollywood. Gene was a Marine. He served in the early 1950s during the Korean War era. After his discharge, he struggled for years working odd jobs trying to break into acting. He finally made it in the late 1960s, and by the 1970s he was a star. The French Connection in 1971 won him an Oscar. Unforgiven in 1992 won him another. He was one of the most respected actors of his generation. But he walked away in 2004. Retired. Moved to Santa Fe with Betsy. Wrote a few novels, lived quietly, avoided the spotlight. No scandals. No controversies. No enemies. At least, none that anyone knew about. But the FBI digs deeper. They look at his military records, his financial records, his correspondence. They interview old friends, former colleagues, neighbors. And they find nothing. No grudges. No debts. No threats. Gene Hackman was exactly who he appeared to be. A man who lived his life, made his mark, and retired in peace. So why would anyone want him dead? The FBI doesn't have an answer. But they keep digging. They also look into Betsy Arakawa. She was born in Hawaii, grew up in a musical family. She was a classically trained pianist, performed in small venues, taught lessons. She met Gene at a gym in Los Angeles in the mid-1980s. He was 55. She was 25. 30 years apart. But they clicked. Friends said it was genuine, that they balanced each other. Gene was intense, driven. Betsy was calm, grounded. They married in 1991 and stayed together for 34 years. No children. No drama. Just two people who loved each other and wanted to be left alone. The FBI finds nothing suspicious in Betsy's past either. No debts. No enemies. No secrets. Just a woman who loved music and loved her husband. Which makes the manner of her death even more tragic. Because if that EM pulse hadn't affected her, if she had been able to call for help, she might still be alive. But she wasn't. And for 9 days that house was a tomb. Gene's body decomposing in the foyer. Betsy's body decomposing in the bathroom. One dog dead in a closet. 2 dogs slowly starving. And nobody knew. The FBI is also trying to figure out where that electromagnetic pulse came from. They've detected residual traces of the signal, but no source. They searched the property, the surrounding area, even the neighboring homes, though they're miles away. Nothing. No transmitter. No device. No evidence of any equipment that could generate such a pulse. They check satellite imagery from February 17th, looking for vehicles, people, anything unusual near the Hackman property. Nothing. They pull traffic camera footage from the main road leading to the house. A few cars pass by that evening, all of them accounted for. None stop. None turn onto Gene's road. They interview every delivery driver, every utility worker, every person who might have been in the area that day. All alibis check out. The FBI is hitting a wall. If the signal came from an external device, it's gone now. And whoever deployed it covered their tracks perfectly. But there's another possibility. What if it wasn't a device at all? What if it was an environmental event? A freak occurrence, a 1 in a million combination of atmospheric conditions, solar activity, and electromagnetic interference that just happened to converge on Gene Hackman's home at the exact moment his pacemaker was vulnerable? The FBI consults with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They pull data on solar flares, geomagnetic storms, anything that could cause unusual EM activity on February 17th. And they find something. There was a minor geomagnetic storm that day. Not major, not enough to disrupt power grids or satellites, but enough to cause slight fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. Could that have been the source? The experts say it's possible. But unlikely. The kind of localized, focused EM pulse that affected Gene's pacemaker would require more than a geomagnetic storm. It would require a direct, concentrated source. Still, it's a lead. And in a case with so few leads, the FBI takes it seriously. They also test Gene's pacemaker itself. Maybe it malfunctioned. Maybe it was a defect, a glitch, something internal rather than external. The manufacturer sends engineers to examine the device. They run diagnostics, check the firmware, analyze every component. And they find no defect. The pacemaker was functioning perfectly until that signal hit. It wasn't a malfunction. It was interference. Which brings the FBI back to square one. Something sent that signal. Something killed Gene Hackman. And that same something might have doomed Betsy Arakawa. But what? And who? And why? The FBI pushes harder. They invoke national security protocols, argue that this is now a potential murder investigation. The DoD relents. They send over a partial file. And what's in it is strange. Gene Hackman was part of an experimental communications unit in 1952. They were testing early radio jamming technology, electromagnetic signal disruption, the kind of tech that would later evolve into modern EW, electronic warfare. He was exposed to high-frequency radio waves, tested prototype equipment, participated in exercises designed to disrupt enemy communications. And then the program was shut down. Deemed too dangerous. Too many health risks. Several Marines in the unit reported headaches, memory loss, heart palpitations. One died of a heart attack at 23. The program was classified, buried, forgotten. Until now. The FBI is stunned. Gene Hackman, 70 years ago, was exposed to the exact kind of technology that might have killed him. Is that a coincidence? Or is it connected? Did someone know about his past? Did someone target him because of it? Or is the universe just that cruel, that ironic? The FBI doesn't know. But they're now looking at everyone involved in that 1952 program. Most are dead. A few are still alive in their 90s, scattered across the country. The FBI interviews them. None remember Gene. None have any idea why someone would target him now. It's another dead end. But it's also a chilling connection. And it raises a terrifying question. If Gene was targeted because of his past, who else from that program is at risk? The FBI quietly contacts the surviving members, warns them to be vigilant, to report anything unusual. And then they turn their attention back to Betsy. Because her death is just as mysterious, just as unresolved. And the more they learn, the more they realize that those 9 days of silence might have been the most horrific part of this entire tragedy. Comment below if you think Gene's past is connected to his death. And hit subscribe because this case is about to take an even darker turn. Who were Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa? Not the public personas, not the actor and the pianist, but the real people behind the tragedy. Because to understand why this case is so haunting, you have to understand what was lost. Gene was born in 1930 in the middle of the Great Depression. His childhood was rough. His father left when he was young. His mother struggled. He grew up fast, grew up tough. He lied about his age to join the Marines at 16. Served his country, got out, drifted for years. He worked as a doorman, a furniture mover, a soda jerk. He studied acting at night, got rejected over and over. He was told he didn't have the look, didn't have the charisma. But he kept going. And in 1964 he got his first real break. A small role in a film called Lilith. And from there he climbed. By 1971 he was Detective Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, chasing down drug dealers through the streets of New York, and winning an Oscar for it. He became one of the most versatile actors in Hollywood. He could play heroes, villains, anything in between. But he never let it go to his head. Friends said he was grounded, humble, more interested in the work than the fame. And in 1991 at 61 he married Betsy Arakawa. She was 31. 30 years younger. And the tabloids had a field day. But Gene and Betsy didn't care. They were happy. She grounded him even more, helped him see life beyond Hollywood. And in 2004 at 74, Gene walked away. Retired. Moved to Santa Fe. Started writing novels. Lived quietly with Betsy and their dogs. No red carpets. No interviews. Just peace. Betsy was his anchor. Friends said she kept him steady, kept him happy. She played piano, composed music, taught lessons to local kids. She loved animals, loved the New Mexico landscape. She and Gene would take long drives through the desert, just the two of them, no destination in mind. They were inseparable. And for 34 years they built a life together. A quiet, private, beautiful life. And then, on February 17, 2025, that life ended. An invisible pulse. A stopped heart. And 9 days of silence. The FBI is still investigating. But as of now they have no solid leads. No suspects. No device. No definitive proof of foul play. Just a lot of strange coincidences and unanswered questions. So let's talk about the theories. Because the internet is full of them and some are more plausible than others. Theory 1. It was an accident. A freak environmental event. A geomagnetic storm combined with some kind of localized electrical surge. Gene's pacemaker was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's rare, but it's possible. Pacemakers can be affected by strong electromagnetic fields. MRI machines, for example, can disrupt them if patients aren't careful. Maybe something in or near the house, a malfunctioning appliance, a power line issue, created a similar effect. And Betsy, already in poor health, couldn't handle the shock of finding Gene dead. She panicked, her heart gave out, and she died days later. It's tragic, but it's plausible. And it doesn't require any conspiracy. The problem with this theory is the FBI's finding. The signal they detected wasn't random. It was specific, targeted, low frequency. Not the kind of thing a malfunctioning microwave would produce. So if it was an accident, it was a very specific, very unusual accident. Theory 2. It was a government experiment gone wrong. This one's popular in the conspiracy circles. The idea is that the US government or some rogue agency was testing a new electromagnetic weapon. Maybe they were aiming for a nearby target, a military installation, a communications hub, and Gene's house was collateral damage. Or maybe Gene was the target because of his past involvement in that 1952 EM program. Maybe he knew something, saw something, and someone wanted him silenced 70 years later. It's dramatic. It's spy thriller material. And there's a tiny bit of circumstantial evidence to support it. Gene's classified military past, the nature of the signal, the lack of any device left behind. But it's also a huge leap. Why would the government target a 95-year-old retired actor? What possible threat could he pose? And if they wanted him dead, why use such an exotic, traceable method? Why not just make it look like a heart attack, which at his age would be completely believable? This theory doesn't hold up under scrutiny. But it's out there. Theory 3. It was a personal attack. Someone with a grudge, someone with the technical know-how, built a device and used it to kill Gene. Maybe an obsessed fan. Maybe someone from his past. Maybe a rival, a jealous colleague, someone who felt wronged by him decades ago and finally got their revenge. The problem here is motive. Gene didn't have enemies. Everyone who knew him said the same thing. He was kind, professional, respectful. He didn't burn bridges. He didn't make enemies. And even if someone did hate him, why wait until he was 95? Why use such a complicated, risky method? It doesn't add up. One dog died. 2 survived. There were no signs of forced entry, no robbery, no obvious foul play. The FBI detected traces of an electromagnetic signal but no source device. Gene had a classified military past involving EM technology in 1952. And that's it. That's all we know for sure. Everything else is theory, speculation, guesswork. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of this case. That we may never know the truth. That Gene Hackman, one of the greatest actors of his generation, died in a way that can't be fully explained. That Betsy Arakawa, a woman who just wanted to live quietly and make music, spent her final days alone and afraid. That somewhere out there, there might be a device, a weapon, a technology that can kill invisibly and leave almost no trace. Or maybe it was just a tragic accident. A perfect storm of bad luck, bad timing, and bad circumstances. Maybe the universe is just cruel sometimes. Maybe there's no villain in this story, no mastermind, no conspiracy. Just two people who died too soon in a way that nobody saw coming. But I don't think that's the case. And I don't think the FBI thinks that either. Because they're still investigating. They haven't closed the case. They're still looking for answers. And that tells me they believe something happened in that house on February 17th. Something that wasn't natural. Something that wasn't accidental. Something that someone did. The FBI has interviewed over 200 people in connection with this case. Former Marines from Gene's unit, though most are dead. Neighbors, though they're few and far between. Delivery drivers, utility workers, anyone who might have been near the property. They've analyzed weeks of surveillance footage from nearby businesses, traffic cameras, even satellite imagery. They've consulted with experts in electromagnetic warfare, pacemaker technology, neurology, forensic pathology. They've run simulations, built models, tested every possible scenario. And they still don't have a definitive answer. But they have something. A pattern. A signature. The type of EM signal detected at Gene's house matches, almost exactly, a signal detected at two other locations in the past 18 months. One in Arizona. One in Texas. Both times, elderly individuals with pacemakers died suddenly. Both times the deaths were ruled natural. Heart attacks. Nobody questioned them. Nobody looked deeper. Until now. The FBI is reopening those cases. They're looking for connections, for patterns, for any link between the victims. And they're finding some. All three victims were veterans. All three served in the 1950s. All three were part of, or adjacent to, experimental military programs involving radio and electromagnetic technology. Could be a coincidence. But three coincidences start to look like a pattern. And if there's a pattern, that means there's a killer. Someone who's been testing this technology for over a year. Someone who's getting better at it. Someone who might strike again. The FBI hasn't gone public with this information yet. They don't want to cause a panic. They don't want to alert the perpetrator. But they're working the case hard. Very hard. And they're hoping that someone somewhere knows something. Maybe you do. Maybe you've heard something, seen something, know something about electromagnetic pulse devices or who might have access to them. Maybe you served in the military with Gene Hackman. Maybe you worked on similar technology. Maybe you know someone who's been acting strange, talking about old military programs, showing unusual interest in pacemakers or electromagnetic interference. If you do, the FBI wants to hear from you. They've set up a tip line specifically for this case. And they're taking every tip seriously. Because right now, tips are all they have. Let's talk about what this case means. Beyond Gene and Betsy. Beyond the investigation. This case exposes a terrifying vulnerability. There are millions of people in the United States alone who have pacemakers. Millions more with insulin pumps, cochlear implants, neurostimulators, deep brain stimulators, all kinds of electronic medical devices. And most of those devices can be disrupted by electromagnetic interference. We've known this for years. That's why hospitals have signs warning people with pacemakers to stay away from MRI machines. That's why airports have warnings about medical devices and security scanners. But we've always assumed those threats were accidental. Environmental. Not deliberate. This case suggests that assumption might be wrong. If someone can weaponize EM pulses, if they can target individuals with medical devices and kill them remotely, invisibly, that's a form of assassination that's almost impossible to defend against. You can't armor plate a pacemaker. You can't shield your heart from electromagnetic radiation without interfering with the device's function. You're just vulnerable. And if you're elderly, if you live alone, if you die suddenly, who's going to question it? Who's going to demand an autopsy, a full investigation, an analysis of your medical device's data logs? Nobody. It'll just be written off as old age. Natural causes. And the killer walks away. That's the nightmare scenario the FBI is facing. And that's why they're so desperate to solve this case. Because if they don't, if they can't prove what happened or catch who did it, then this technology is out there. And it could be used again. The medical device industry is taking this seriously too. Pacemaker manufacturers have started issuing security updates, firmware patches designed to make their devices more resistant to external interference. But it's a band-aid solution. The fundamental vulnerability remains. Hospitals are being briefed. Doctors are being told to look for unusual patterns in pacemaker deaths. Security agencies are being looped in. But it's all reactive. The horse has already left the barn. And somewhere out there, someone might be holding the reins. Let's go back to Gene and Betsy one more time. Because in all the talk of electromagnetic pulses and FBI investigations and conspiracy theories, it's easy to forget that these were real people. Gene Hackman wasn't just an actor. He was a man who overcame poverty, who served his country, who worked his way up from nothing to become one of the most respected performers of his generation. He was a man who loved his wife, who loved his dogs, who loved the quiet beauty of New Mexico. He wrote novels, painted, lived a full life. And at 95 he deserved to die peacefully, surrounded by people who loved him. Not alone on a foyer floor, his heart stopped by an invisible signal. Betsy Arakawa wasn't just Gene Hackman's wife. She was a talented musician, a kind person, someone who chose a quiet life away from the spotlight. She could have leveraged Gene's fame, could have pursued her own celebrity. But she didn't. She just wanted to make music and be with the man she loved. And she deserved better than dying alone in a bathroom, confused and terrified, her husband's body decomposing in the next room. They both deserved better. And that's what makes this case so heartbreaking. Not just the mystery of how they died, but the injustice of it. The senselessness. The cruelty. Whether it was an accident or an attack, whether it was a freak occurrence or a deliberate act, Gene and Betsy didn't deserve this. And their story deserves to be told. Not just as a true crime mystery, but as a reminder that behind every case, every statistic, every headline, there are real people. People with histories, with loves, with lives that mattered. So where does the case stand now? As of today, it's still open. The FBI is still investigating. They're following leads, analyzing data, consulting experts. They've classified it as a suspicious death investigation, which means they haven't ruled out foul play. But they also haven't found enough evidence to call it a murder. It's in limbo. And it might stay there. Because without a device, without a suspect, without a clear motive, there's only so much they can do. The pacemaker data proves Gene's death was caused by external interference. But it doesn't prove it was deliberate. It doesn't prove someone targeted him. It just proves something happened. And proving what happened is a lot harder than proving something happened. The case has gotten national attention. News outlets have covered it. True crime podcasts have dissected it. Online sleuths have built entire theories around it. And that attention has helped. It's kept pressure on the FBI to keep investigating. It's brought in tips from people who might have seen something, heard something, know something. But it's also brought in a lot of noise. Fake tips, conspiracy theories, people trying to inject themselves into the story for attention. The FBI has to sort through all of it, and that takes time. Time that, in a case this cold, might be running out. Here's what I think. And this is just my opinion, based on everything I've researched, everything I've read, every expert I've consulted. I think Gene Hackman was targeted. I think someone knew about his medical condition, knew he had a pacemaker, knew he lived in an isolated area. I think they used an electromagnetic pulse device to disrupt that pacemaker and cause his death. I think they chose him because of his past, because of his involvement in that 1952 EM program. Maybe as revenge for something that happened 70 years ago. Maybe as a test of their technology. Maybe for reasons we'll never understand. And I think Betsy was collateral damage. She wasn't supposed to die. Or maybe she was, but slower to cover up what happened to Gene. Either way, her death is on whoever sent that signal. I think the FBI knows this too. But they can't prove it. Not yet. And without proof, there's no arrest, no trial, no justice. Just a closed case and 2 more names added to the list of unsolved deaths. But I also think the investigation isn't over. I think the FBI is building a case slowly, methodically. And when they find enough evidence, when they identify a suspect, they'll move. And when they do, the world will be watching. So what can we take away from the Gene Hackman case? First, that privacy can be dangerous. Gene and Betsy's isolation, their desire to live quietly away from the world, meant that nobody noticed when they died. 9 days. That's a long time to be dead before anyone finds you. And in those 9 days, critical evidence degraded, decomposed, disappeared. If they'd had more contact with neighbors, if they'd checked in regularly with friends or family, maybe someone would have noticed sooner. Maybe Betsy would still be alive. Second, that technology is a double-edged sword. Medical devices like pacemakers save lives. millions of them. But they also create vulnerabilities. And as technology advances, as devices become more sophisticated, those vulnerabilities will only increase. We need to think about security, about protection, about how to defend against threats we never imagined. Third, that the past never really dies. Gene Hackman's involvement in that 1952 military program might have been forgotten by everyone, including him. But someone remembered, or someone found out. And that knowledge, that connection to a Cold War-era experiment, might have gotten him killed 70 years later. Our histories follow us. Our choices, our actions, our associations. They leave traces. And sometimes, those traces come back to haunt us. And fourth, that even in death, some mysteries remain unsolved. We live in an age of surveillance, of data, of technology that can track our every move, record our every heartbeat. But even with all that, some things slip through the cracks. Some questions go unanswered. Some cases go cold. And we have to live with that uncertainty. We have to accept that not every story has a neat ending, not every mystery gets solved. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa are gone. Their house in Santa Fe sits empty, a memorial to a life lived quietly and ended tragically. The FBI is still working the case, still looking for answers. And somewhere out there, maybe in a government lab, maybe in a hacker's workshop, maybe in the hands of someone with a grudge and the knowledge to act on it, there's a device. A device that can kill invisibly. A device that might be used again. And until the FBI finds it, until they catch whoever used it, we're all just a little bit more vulnerable. So I'm asking you, if you've made it this far, if you've listened to Gene and Betsy's story, if you've felt even a fraction of the sadness and anger and confusion that this case inspires, do something. Share this video. Talk about this case. Keep it in the public eye. Because the more people who know, the more attention it gets, the harder it is for whoever did this to hide. Drop a comment below. Tell me your theory. Tell me what you think happened. Tell me where you're watching from, because this case has reached people all over the world and every perspective matters. Hit that like button if you want the FBI to solve this case. And subscribe, because I'll be following this investigation. When there are updates, when there are breaks in the case, I'll be here to tell you. This is a story that's not over yet. And Gene Hackman, the man who gave us Popeye Doyle, who gave us Little Bill Daggett, who gave us decades of unforgettable performances, deserves justice. Betsy Arakawa, the woman who loved him, who stood by him, who chose a life of music and peace, deserves justice. And if we keep watching, if we keep asking questions, if we keep demanding answers, maybe, just maybe, they'll get it. Thank you for following Gene and Betsy's story to the end. If this case moved you, hit like and subscribe. We have more stories that deserve to be heard. Share your thoughts, your feelings, and your final theory in the comments below. And remember, in a world where someone can kill with an invisible signal, where technology can be weaponized in ways we never imagined, where an old couple can die alone and unnoticed for 9 days, we all need to pay attention. We all need to watch out for each other. Because the truth is out there. And it's stranger and scarier than any fiction. Stay curious. Stay vigilant. And never stop asking questions. Because the moment we stop asking, the moment we accept the easy answers, that's when the real criminals get away. Gene Hackman spent his life telling stories. Let's make sure his final story, as tragic and mysterious as it is, leads to the truth, wherever that truth may lie.